Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dwarven Tavern for yet another review. And in keeping with the last two I've done, doing another review of Traveler stuff, because it's Traveler. I actually probably should have led off with this one, but I didn't. So I'm going to do it anyway. This is the Traveler starter set. And it is, of course, from, well, not of course, but it is from Mongoose Publishing. And it goes for $69.99, unless you can find it less expensively somewhere else. I didn't actually say where you could get it for that price, but if you can find it cheaper, I would get it. I would get it anyway. So, for those of you who like the Dwarven Tavern beginner videos, this is an excellent thing, and I believe more than likely we're going to do a beginner video of Traveler, because Traveler is different than any other role-playing game of which I am aware, in that it begins playing you in it. Let's talk about English, shall we? You begin playing the game as actually a role-playing game as you are rolling up your character. You immediately start building. You don't have to. Okay, so you do another character in a different genre, in a different game, like D&D or Pathfinder or whatever. And which, you know, I'm not putting those games down at all because I love them all. Well, not all of them, but I do love most of them. And the ones I love the most are the ones I concentrate on these reviews. So the way you start D&D is you roll up character, and you start with the dice, and you roll them, and you got your character. And then if the dungeon master requires it, or the game master, or the whatever, you may have to write a backstory or something. You may be required by your DM, and it's the burden is on you. I don't know if it's a burden. You might enjoy doing that. I do. But the responsibility, put it that way, the responsibility of creating the character's depth is up to you, and this is your shovel, because you have to write down what your character has done, where they're from, and you have to imagine all that. And if you're a beginner, that's difficult, or not. I mean, it really varies. So because we had a brand new player begin with a brand new character, and he had a super cool backstory prepared because he envisioned this character before he rolled it up, which is fine. The point is, with Traveler, you don't have to do that at all, because all of your characters, not all of it, but most of your character's backstory is developed as you play the game. As you roll up the character becomes fleshy and full of life and vigor, and you begin to accumulate battle scars before you've actually taken your character out into battle. And for that, I adore this game. It makes it so easy. Now, what is the starter set? Well, the starter set, it's a boxed set, as you can see when I unboxed it. It comes in this lovely box, which is a box. It's very boxy. It's box-like in its boxiness. And it comes with an adorable set of 6-sided dice. Although, you know, if you're anything like me, you may already have a few dice handy. If you're not like me, well, no, I can't say that, because I began at one point in time, and I only had a few handfuls of dice when I first started playing. So this game includes a map of, and I'll get into all this. I'm just showing you what's in it. It has a number of pre-generated, pre-rolled characters in their sheets, and it's got this lovely little ribbon attached to the bottom of the box, which they didn't have to do this at all, but it makes it so cool because it makes it easy to get these out without scraping up the edges. So it comes with 3 books. One is Characters and Combat. One is rather scuffed, or it's not scuffed, it's dusty. Is Spacecraft and Worlds, and the third one is The Fall of Tinath, or Tynath, or Zib. I don't know how you pronounce it. Although I did find out something. I asked Matt, the author of many of these books, I asked him how to pronounce his name, because I hate when people get my name wrong. It's Goins, and his name was spelled Sprange. I couldn't guess if it was Sprang or Sprange. So I asked him, and you know, he's a real cool guy, and I asked him, I said, how do you pronounce your last name, dude? Because I want to get it right. And he said it's Sprange, as in it rhymes with strange. So his name is Matthew Sprange, which it's a pretty cool name. I mean, that could be be like a wizard in the DC universe. DC universe. Okay, I'm going to chop something off of myself right now for that. So, yeah, but he's real cool about it. And he's just cool in general because he sent me all these things himself. I recommend visiting the Mongoose homepage because there's a link to the Dwarven Tavern reviews on the Mongoose webpage, just because he is just that cool. So, enough lauding of that. The first book is, since this is a starter set, it begins you in a very starter-like way. It explains what it is in an introduction. The Third Imperium, while Traveler, is intended to be used for any science fiction setting its players devise, the longest running commercially available universe, indeed one of the oldest role-playing game settings of all, which I started when this was fairly new. I started this game when it came out, which is why it's one of my favorites. It has withstood the test of time. Indeed, one of the oldest role-playing game settings of all time is the Third Imperium. Humanity has gone to the stars and found them crowded with other forms of life and other sentient races, and science and technology have advanced vastly over the present day. But the essential nature of humanity is unchanged because we are just basically chimps with laser rifles. If you do any DNA comparisons between us and the lower primates, yeah, we're essentially the same thing. I mean, that's why McDonald's is so popular. As a psychology professor once told me, McDonald's is popular because we still crave that the fatty and salty of bone marrow, which is why we survived and other hominids didn't, or other creatures didn't, because we knew how to crack the bones and get the marrow. Look it up. Life continues as it does today, only spread out over the sea of stars. A mighty Imperium unites thousands of star systems under a single rule, but it is beset by enemies both internal and external, as one might imagine. You know, the big evil whatever is always evil because it encompasses everything, and that may or may not be true. Corruption exists everywhere in every branch of every politics, so everybody's in it for themselves, no matter what political or socioeconomic model you follow. There is someone at the top of it screwing over people below them. And there's a billion examples in all the history books. Anyway, that's about as political as I'm going to get, ever. It says down here further, it says players and travelers. Most of the participants in a traveler game will be players. Imagine that, if you will. Usually each player generates a character using the traveler creation rules. That character becomes the player's avatar in the game world and is called a traveler. These travelers are the central protagonists of the game, or they can be antagonists if they so choose. That's the kind of game you want to run. Because I actually, when I first started playing, I joined a group of players who they invited me to become a member of their rebellion group called Lochnar. And as you know, the Lochnar is the ball in the animated film Heavy Metal, right? So they just took that name because they thought it was cool, which it is. One might argue that it's a lack of imagination to come up with an original name, but I'm not going to be that guy. Throughout this book, the terms player and traveler are synonymous. The term character is used to describe those in the game controlled by the referee rather than the player, what are often called non-player characters or NPCs. Now, that's fine. But it's good that they delineate, there's that word again, that they delineate terms so you know what they're talking about. And this book was also written by Matthew Sprange. And I did say it right that time. The referee is the Dungeon Master. It's just ingrained, man. I can't even. And then it talks about scenarios and campaigns. Traveler Rule 0. Many role-playing games have a Rule 0 which marks out a referee's Fiat, or his Escort, or Ford F-150, or his Miata. The notion that the referee is free to ignore or change any rule to fit in with his campaign. This is true of Traveler as well, but it is worth making a special note about this game. Traveler comprises several mini-games such as world creation, trade, and character creation that allows much of the game to run on autopilot, and that's absolutely true. In many circumstances, the referee is able to make a few rolls on a few tables and generate characters, battles, and even a sizable part of the known universe. This is great news for the busy referee, the hustle and bustle of game refereeing. This is great news for the busy referee who can then concentrate on the adventure. However, while these tools are in place, the referee should never feel bound by them and has the latitude to ignore any generated results in preference to his own creation. And I think that's just fantastic because, I think most role-playing games assert that game master or the referee, dungeon master, is always a final say and can override or create new or insert rules as they see fit. And this just reinforces that admonishment or that assertion and or the guideline rather, more of a set of guidelines. And again, Matt has I don't know if it really is, a lot of people say so I think it is true. It is a consensus that his writing is exceptional because it's intelligently written but not unclear. And that's a very difficult thing to do, and I admire that. I admire that ability. So it has a bunch of campaign ideas. I mean, okay, so this is a starter set. It should have campaign ideas, right? It does. The trader campaign, the military campaign, the explorer campaign, and the traveler campaign. It gives a large number of possibilities and options. It's not just like it's for beginners, so 2 + 2 is 4. No, it actually takes into account that people are not stupid in general, and that unless of course you are, which I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. You got to get used to it. We all do. Eventually. It has recommendations for further reading, like The Traveler Companion, High Guard, Tour of the Imperium, Central Supply, and the Vehicle Handbook, which I've already reviewed. And then it discusses all the game conventions, like the 1 dice, 1d2, 1d, 2d. So in order to avoid, because it uses 6-sided dice, right? So in order to avoid writing out, roll 2 6-sided dice and add them together. It says 1d, 2d, 27d in the case of meteors. And it also goes through the D66. It explains everything. It's got a pretty nice little glossary. It goes over the tech levels, which is super cool. And that's another thing that I really like about Traveler, because, remember if you ever watched Star Trek where they would go to a primitive culture, like any name an episode where there's like a cargo cult or something like that, and they've got really low, they're like Copper Age or even Stone Age. This accounts for all those. It has Tech Level 0, which is no technology, with the simplest of tools and principles. The simple tools, that is still a type of technology, but they handle it. They handle it where Tech Level 0 is like Stone Age. Then Tech Level 1 is primitive with the Bronze or Iron Age. Tech Level 2 is the Renaissance. 3 is primitive firearms, so early 19th century. 4 brings in plastics, radio, and the like, right? Tech Level 5 brings widespread electrification, telecommunications, and internal combustion engines, and so forth, all the way up to Tech Level 15, which is High Stellar, with black globe generators and the development of synthetic anagathics, which the human lifespan is. Anagathics is anti-aging medication that you can take. And then it goes up to jump 6. It says higher level technology levels exist. Indeed, there is no theoretical upper limit, which is another cool thing about Traveler. The book is put together in just about my favorite way. I just can't get over it. It's got numerous tables throughout, characteristic modifiers, skills, mental characteristics, physical characteristics. Your physical characteristics are strength, dexterity, and endurance. The mental are intellect, education, and social standing, which is fine. Your intellect is, if you want to equate it to D&D, where you got wisdom, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Intellect is kind of like your intelligence. Your education is kind of like your wisdom. Kinda. It's not a direct analogy. And your social standing is kind of like your charisma, but obviously. So the strength, dexterity, and endurance is just a straight up translation from strength, dexterity, and constitution. And then it has here on page 10 this fantastic table of it's a flow chart for exactly how to roll up a character. That is very starter set stuff, and their illustrations are throughout and done with such taste, and I just really like it. And it's great for a new players. Then it's got your pre-career education, your university. It's all the same stuff that's in the core rule book, but it's presented so that beginners can eat that elephant one bite at a time without being overwhelmed by this enormous volume of rules sitting in front of them. It's smaller, bite-sized chunks, and it goes over the military academy, career descriptions, drifters, and the draft, which That's very flower child of you, traveler. Changing careers, the rules of that. And then it has these tables, which, as I can see them, it has these tables for each of the character classes, like the agent, and it's presented large, encapsulated, because I don't know what kind of degrees Matt has, or the other folks at Mongoose, what kind of degrees they have, but I would bet money that at least a few of them have degrees in education, because this is a principle called chunking, where you have the bite-sized chunks of information encapsulated in its own receptacle, in its own reservoir, for the student thereof to consume at their own speed in a manageable method. And so it goes over the citizen, the drifter, the entertainer, the marine, the merchant, of course, the navy, the rogue, the scholar, the secholar, the scholar, the scout, and I think the scout is the last one. Yeah, and it has those character classes for you to be able to consume at your own leisure, as it were. And then, of course, it goes over the life events and the benefits of mustering out, pensions, the aging table, the injury table, skills packages, etc., etc. So it's all done in a very orderly and bite-sized way. Super easy to understand, and really nicely presented. So, and then when you get to the character races or species, as it were, because as we all know, the term race is not of pleasant or scientifically accurate origins. Species, however, different story. So right here, it has the illustration for the Aslan, the Vargar, and the humans. Of course, the Aslan are like Aslan, like lions. The Vargar they're like genetically modified canines that were developed by someone as a slave race or as a colonizing race, or I forget the actual story, but I'm remiss for that. But the Vargar are just basically anthropomorphized dogs, like wolves or huskies or German shepherds or whatever, and they're one of my favorite species. And then of course humans, which are one of my least favorite. In real life, actually. No, I'm kidding. I love everybody, except those I don't. And then it has a really cool section on the prisoner, which is presented just like the other jobs, but it says every society here on page 54, every society has its bad apples, and even in the far future, punishments usually take place within faceless institutions where criminals can be conveniently forgotten. One does not how to qualify. One does not qualify prison. You got sentenced there for a crime you may or may not have committed, which is absolutely true. Like in Star Trek, the Gulag Rurapente, where Captain Kirk made out with a shapeshifter in the movie. So, and then it has, depending on your roles and how many terms you were sentenced for, you get skills and training while you're there. So that can be an actual profession. Long-term prisoner, first-time free man. Then it goes over skills and tasks and how to adjudicate for said quandaries. If a task is simple, the target number is 2+. If it is formidable, the target number is 14+. And that is beyond very difficult, which is 12. So as you know, rolling 2 dice, getting a 14 on 2 6-sided dice, newbie. Rolling a 14 is not generally possible unless you've got a Sharpie and a few extra dots. You have to have really good bonuses with your stats in order to achieve those formidable tasks. Then it has the effects, the time frames of increments. So if you don't know how long something is going to take, you look at page 60, and it says if a task is the example action, shooting, punching, or jumping. So it's like, I'm going to punch the living shit out of this guy. It would take 1d6, 1 dice of seconds to achieve that. Or if you wanted to repair a damaged ship, it would take 1d times 10 hours. So you would roll that, and say, well, this is going to take you about 40 hours of good solid work to get this thing done. It's going to take 24 hours, Captain. That's the best I can do. Has it fixed in 20 minutes? Because you tell them it's going to take 50 times longer than it actually is, and then you look like a hero, Scotty. Combing a city for a missing person could take 1 die of days. So there you go. That's a fantastic tool, and it's right there in the book. So, and then it has a task chain, which will find themselves performing a series of interlinked tasks or working with a group. Finding a buyer for a cargo of illegal goods calls for a streetwise check to find a fence, then a broker to negotiate a price. The results of the streetwise check can conceivably influence the quality and competence of the fence, which will affect the broker chance. So, if you have a computer system that you have to hack into, and you've got to get the initial password, and then you have to break through the firewall, and then you have to crack the encryption, and then you have to decipher the code itself. You know, that's a long series. But if you crack not necessarily the password, but if you crack the firewall, that might give you an indication of how well the next step of breaking through the encryption is going to be, and so forth and so on. So as you go, things will get easier unless it doesn't, and of course that's always up to the referee. And then it explains boon and bane, and well, I might as well go ahead and take a look at this and let you know what boon and bane is. The task difficulties. There are 3 factors that can affect a check in Traveler: task difficulties, boons, and banes. The dice modifiers and dice modifiers. I one of these days I'm gonna learn how to read, I swear. However, all 3 are used in all 3? All boons and banes is considered one. All 3 are used in very specific circumstances, and a referee should use the following principles. Difficulty. Before any other factors are taken into account, the referee should set the difficulty of the task based on how hard he believes the task should be without any exterior effects. For example, making a phone call is a simple task and remains so even if the traveler is hanging upside down from a spacecraft flying through a storm. What? That's a fantastic situation. Hello, I'd like to order a pizza, and you're hanging upside down, flying through a storm, locked outside your spacecraft. Oh, that got me. Dice modifiers in general, these would be regarded as hardwired into the rules and only applied if they're listed in the Traveler rulebook or supplement. Of course, Rule 0 always applies. And boon and bane, if an exterior factor is influencing the task for better or worse than a boon or bane is applied to the check, making a phone call while hanging upside down from a spacecraft in a storm, I might add, is a good example of bane being applied. The vast majority of cases, the referee simply needs to set a task difficulty and then decide whether a boon and bane need be applied, and any necessary dice modifiers will be suggested by the rules. So the boon and bane, the task difficulty allows a referee to pre-plan characteristic checks travelers will need to succeed in during an adventure. However, there will likely be situations that arise that will make things either easier or harder for the traveler. This is where boons and banes come in. And I'm not talking about Daniel or Batman's foe molded by it. If a traveler has help, such as good tools, competent aids, or other beneficial circumstances, he receives a boon. This means he rolls an extra dice. Oh my God, come on, really? An extra dice? Don't do that ever again. This means he rolls an extra die during a check and discards the lowest, much like the advantage-disadvantage thing in Pathfinder, in 5e, I think, also now. If a traveler is hindered by a check, such as with power tools or dimly lit environment or other negative circumstances, he receives a bane. This means he rolls 3 dice instead of 2, an extra die. I've never wanted to mark in a book so bad as right now. During a check and discards the highest. So boons and banes can be significantly affectatious of your character. Now, it goes on to talk about things like leadership and free actions, reactions, extended actions. It covers weapons to an extent. And it has, and it maintains this bite-sized chunkery of information that makes it super easy to consume. such as damage. Each weapon of Traveler lists the damage and inflicts as a number of dice. That is used correctly. A rifle, for example, has a damage score of 3D, meaning it feels like it's coming right at you. Upon a successful attack, damage is rolled for with the effect of the attack roll added to the total. Damage is initially applied to a target's endurance, which is hilarious because it actually says damage is initially applied to the target's end. It depends on where you shoot him in it. If a target is reduced to 0 endurance, then he's had his ass shot off. Then any excess damage is deducted from the target's strength or dex. If either strength or dex are reduced to 0, the traveler becomes unconscious and any further damage is deducted from the remaining physical characteristic. If all 3 are reduced to 0, the traveler has been killed. Healing damage is covered on page 5 of Book 2, Spacecraft and Worlds, that's fine. Because when you buy this set, you get all 3 books, so it's no biggie. It explains all the things with all of the chunkery that I was speaking of earlier, in a very nice way, and it covers enough, way enough for you to get started with a basic game with new players. It's got an equipment catalogs, the core collection, which is another ad. I love their ads because they're not really ads. It's just another way of immersing a character, a player, into the game by producing and presenting wonderful illustrations like this that are very. I mean, this looks like a lot like Ripley's 10mm armor piercing, caseless armor piercing, high explosive hollow point rounds. Right? Is that what it was? I think so. I think it was all that armor piercing and hollow point's kind of weird, but I don't think it was hollow point. I think it was caseless 10mm. Caseless, armor-piercing, high-explosive rounds. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I like to think I'm a bit of an alien geek, but I may be wrong. So it has a wonderful section on armor with the appropriate illustrations, all presented in a very immersive way. I love the dude in the. It kind of reminds me of the heavy armor, where this is the armor you wear if you want to carry the plasma or fusion man portable dudes. Then it has a section on augments with a whole slew of ads. Normally that would be irritating, but these are cool. These just get you in the mood, man. Computers and software goes on to those sensors. Everything is presented with illustrations, easy to understand and easy to consume chunks of information, turrets and stuff, and a smattering of stuff that's in the core rule book presented in a way that newbies can understand. So that's the core. That's the book 1, characters und combat. Then book 2, Spacecraft and Worlds, should be written by Matt Strange, and they also give credit to the original. The original core mechanics was Gareth Hanrahan, and based on Mark Miller's classic Traveler. So I thought that was super cool, super nice of them. I don't know if they're legally obligated to do that, probably so, but still, it's neat to see the homage. That way you're not standing on the shoulders of giants, you are marching alongside them, growing as you go. This book, Spacecraft and Worlds, covers everything that a referee might need to know about, a beginning referee, a starting referee might need to know about things like encounters, environmental dangers, the effects of radiation, such as Taverneer Lisa and myself are playing this ongoing game of Empyrean, which she just absolutely loves, which is very cool. And she has a terrible habit of somehow attracting radioactive fog. So she is very, very well versed in the realm of radiation damage. Till, of course, we got radiation boosters for her armor, which now she's fine. Then it has creatures like and then they're presented in a nice chunky way. And the illustrations are well done. The skitterer, the living net, the raptor lizard, which apparently exists on all worlds. The scourge, which is a flying beast. The sirene geast worm or geast worm. The thunderer, which is like a brontosaurian type brachiosaur. Then it has, it goes to random encounters, which is a D66. You roll 2 dice and treat them as kind of almost like percentile dice, but it's 11 through 16, 21 through 26, 31 through 36, and so forth. So that gives you a larger number of possibilities. I imagine that you could roll 3 and do more math. Then it has a table of character quirks, random opposition. These are all ideas for the referee to get their game rolling. Rural encounters, such as, you know what? I'm gonna get my dice. I'm gonna use the special traveler dice. These are sci-fi dice. You ever try to do a very simple task and just absolutely lose your shit because you can't do it in the time frame that you have allotted yourself? Rural encounters. What do you encounter? I rolled a 63, which is a monastery or retreat, and then in that monastery or retreat, you meet an alien or another off-worlder, and so forth and so on. You don't have to have anything prepared, but if this is the case, you just kind of wing it if you wish. It talks about the rules of buying a ship, space encounters, which is a D66 for 53. And the method I use for that is I just roll 2 dice, and whichever one is on the left or the leftmost is the higher number, is the 10s. The one on the right is usually 53, a medical ship or hospital. And that makes all kind of possibilities. I mean, just from that, they may need to hire you to make a medicine run, or that might be overcome by a plague, unless that would be too near and dear your own personal experience right now. Make whatever you want. Remote operations like mining drones and probe drones and repair drones, it goes over those. So this is actually replete with possibilities and new rules and new things that your character can get into or purchase somehow or another. Then it has a selection of the common spacecraft. Now these are the same spacecraft that are in the core rule book, but there are just fewer of them to get your character started, such as the ever-popular Free Trader or the Laboratory Ship. That's a good one to have a scenario around. Actually, that's true, because we recently started a Traveler game for Taverneer Josh and Taverneer Lisa, because they had not played Traveler before much, and it began on a laboratory ship where a couple of did the one character thaw out, or did he? No. Anyway, it was set on a laboratory ship where they liberated a specimen from a group that attacked the lab to capture said specimen, and they had to make their escape from that, and that's where the adventure got started. So, a mercenary cruiser, the patrol corvette, safari ship, the scout carrier, one of the most famous wedge-shaped seeker mining ship, etc., etc. And it has a pretty decent number of ships. It goes over the beginnings of psionics, which are my favorite things, and microkinesis. You can pick locks, microsurgery, sabotage a computer system with microkinesis, teleportation, psionic tech, so forth. And then it has the psion character, as it had in the other book, with all the character classes, the things that you can do. Then it goes over trade and freight traffic, and then it has a huge table of trade goods, which I found incredibly cool, which you can always add your own if you wish. Crystals and gems, advanced vehicles, robots, spices. Because you should try to control the spice, because those who control the spice make the best chili. Wood, vehicles, and so forth. So that is the gist of, and then of course it goes through world, universe creation, hydrographics, and so forth. All of it is presented in a super easy to understand, very, very typical of Mongoose, to make things that are easy to understand and intelligently written. I know I keep droning on about that, but it is. I mean, look at some of these books, man. Some of these books, when you read them, you think, wow, they must think I'm a freaking moron. Not so with this book. Then The Fall of Tenath, it explains that this is a series of linked adventures to get the referee and the players used to the game. This book serves several purposes. It is primarily, it says here on page 2, a guide for the referee who can lead a new group of travelers through the linked adventures Along the way, the travelers will accomplish many tasks typical of traveler games. By the end of the campaign, they will be familiar with all the core concepts and tasks and understand where starships and technologies fit into the game. That's an interesting point that they make, because this game is not about starships and technology. It is about the players, much like Star Wars was based on the Hidden Fortress, which is an old Japanese movie. The travelers will also be familiar with the core concept of the game, that travelers travel for personal reasons, and achieving their own goals is the ultimate reward and motivation for seeking personal connections, equipment, or wealth, because there's no levels. It's not a power grab. It kind of is, but it's not like that. It's not like, if I have a blank powered and X leveled wizard that I can control the universe. It's like, no, you gotta kind of work for it, etc. So it talks about getting started. Start small. Good advice. Get moving. Also good advice. Don't info dump. Extremely good advice. Limit the number of major characters you portray. The travelers will interact with non-player characters along the way, or NPCs. Most are inconsequential and can be summed up by a stereotype plus some minor detail. For example, a lazy maintenance technician with a shifty expression. Limit the number of major NPCs you must portray. This is partly because of your own convenience and partly because travelers may have trouble remembering who's who. So, not unlike real life. You are the universe, not the enemy. That is really incredibly important, because the referee you're not trying to beat the players. If you want to beat the players, all you have to do is say, oh, your ship explodes. You don't know why. Or, oh, the planet you're on explodes. You don't know why. Or, you explode. You don't know anything. NPCs are people and fallible. The referee is also fallible, and don't be too generous. Now, Taverneer, I gotta say that Taverneer Ian is one of the best game masters that I have encountered as a player, who is very, very proficient in estimating human behavior, or whatever behavior, animal behavior, which encompasses all living things and maybe even some AI. So it is very important to accurately represent the behavior, and not to do things that that person just wouldn't do, or a person in their position wouldn't do. So that's very important. It's very important. If someone dies, it gives advice for that. Then it goes on through things like the beginning of it, which is Chapter 2, the Athwa subsector, and it explains that. It's got some wonderful maps, so forth and so on, scavenger clouds, equipment and vehicles that that are available to the players, and so forth. I'm not going to go into it too deeply because I don't want to make any spoilers. However, I did read through the adventure before, and it's a I don't know if the word masterpiece is too strong a word, because it's for beginners. So I guess in that respect it is, because anything that can be well written for beginners and still be deep and engrossing, which it very much is. It's well paced, it's well written, it's easy to understand, and it also has its chunks. Of course, it can't be written for players level 5 to 10, because there are no levels. So you just gotta kind of guesstimate about that. But the maps are cool. The storyline is fantastic. It's very imaginative. Not to give anything away, it goes from it has moments of survival, of course. That's what it's all about. It's all about survival. But it goes from moments of survival to moments of high techery. So yeah, it's a fantastic adventure. I commend them on coming up with it. It's really hard to do beginner things and not and do it, and they've done it quite well. Of course, you have these pre-generated characters, and as I promised earlier, this is the map that I will unfurl. So this is like a map that has on this side it is blank, and then on this side it talks about the Caladan system, and it has a number of worlds here in the midst of all these blank hexes that you must somehow get to or get away from, and it has their hex code for the world code, which is all explained in the book. So it gives you an immersive starting point visually to present to your players so they get a better understanding and a better concept of exactly what kind of distances we're talking about in this game. So if you can't present a map, I mean, you know, you could very potentially present a map or not present a map and give your characters an idea how big it is by saying, you know, parsecs or, yeah, but who knows what a parsec is, yeah, right? It's a little over 4 light years, but an exploded star in its very inchoate stages can cover a number of parsecs before it begins to reaccrete into a new solar system, which in our star and Sol, our very own sun, this is like Sol is like a 3rd generation star, which means that it has exploded and recombined at least 2 other times before we came about, which that had to be because it is the exploding of a star that actually enriches and or contaminates the space around it with organic molecules. So yeah, there's that. However, that is really hard to relate to characters, to players, without some kind of visual representation. And even then, it might be hard for them to consume imagining it. So, you know, the more visuals you have, the better. And this map is good. So this is a $70, $69.99 starter set, but it has a lot more than just a simple core rule book, which even if it didn't, it would still be pretty good. And it has 6 pre-generated character cards, which is wonderful. If you can just hand them that and say, this is your character, and explain it to them as you go, that's wonderful. Or you can run them through the rolling up process, which is also incredibly fun. You can die in the process of rolling up your character. Who does that? It's great. So this gets officially 5 axes, and it's right like that, or maybe it's like this. I don't know. It gets 5 axes because it, you know, my judgment on games is, does it do what it's supposed to? And for a starter set, this is freaking #1 fantastic. One of the best starter sets I've ever seen for any game, just because of the way it's presented. And you know, plating is everything, right? Just ask Gordon Ramsay. So on that happy note, and again, this makes me want to play really, really badly, I will bid you adieu, and say on behalf of the entire cast and crew of the Dwarven Tavern, I am your host, Dr. Jeff Goins, wishing you to want for nothing but adventure. And at first I feared it, then I charged into warp speed. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Let the game